The way you have learned driver is incorrect. So today I'm going to bring you through a simple step-by-step process. You're going to have drills, feels, and a practice routine. I'm confident by the end of this, you're going to be a great driver of the golf ball. Just want to say thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe below. Also check out my online academy. I work with more than 100 golfers in 7 different countries. And the membership is basically a simple process for you to follow, where you get individualized swing lessons, custom practice plans, you get time with me, you get a 24/7 coach. So check that out. So what is the number one thing that amateur golfers get wrong with driving? And for me personally, I really do think it's tempo. Our tempo gets quick, it gets tight, the speed is coming in the wrong spot, and then it's hard to square up the club face, right? And that's why it's so much easier to hit it on a driving range than it is to actually get it on the golf course. The one thing I learned from DeWiz Golf, it's this watch, this wearable watch that you would wear to understand 13 different metrics on your body. One of the big things was tempo, and what they found with normal golfers and professional golfers when they went from the driving range to the golf course is the swing got faster, longer, and quicker, right? Which can be a huge issue, right? So what I see on a day-to-day basis as an instructor is I don't see a whole lot of technical changes, and I get guys coming to me every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And over a 6 to 12 month period, the swing doesn't really change all that much, but what changes drastically on a day-to-day basis is the tempo. So if we're thinking tempo, tour tempo is that 3-to-1 feeling where, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 right there, right? And that's what we're trying to generate. We're trying to emulate that feeling that a tour pro has. I always find it interesting that when I go to the Canadian Open, I tend to play my best golf right after because I've been watching that tour tempo all day. And I see the same thing with my amateur clients, golfers from 30 handicaps, 20 handicaps, 10 all the way to scratch. And even my NCAA guys that I work with, they go watch professional golfers and all of a sudden they start playing better because you really start mirroring that tempo. Now, I think the one thing that we have to really understand about tempo is the tension that we have in our setup. So if you think about Ernie Els on the screen here, right? When Ernie sets up to it, how loose and relaxed does he look, right? It doesn't look like there's any tempo. He's almost doing a bit of a hand pump or a shoulder pump to get himself nice and relaxed, a little bit of a shake and a shimmy. So I want you to develop some sort of trigger that you can have in your setup to make you feel relaxed as you set up to it. One for me that really worked well to get myself feeling more relaxed over it, because I would be in a tournament and just shaking like a leaf, and I was worried about a hazard or a tree line, or just I was thinking about score when I was on the tee. You've probably been there before. I know I've been there. It was thinking about a little internal trigger that I can do to create the motion. So I would set up to it, and I let the club bounce a little bit, right? And then right before I pull it back, I would take this knee, kick it in, and then go up. I saw Vijay Singh do that consistently, and I started doing it myself. It's kind of like a little bit of a Matt Wolf move where you turn like this and then go up, and that allowed me to relax. So have some sort of trigger. A couple examples, just like the knee kick there, you can do. Another one would be a nice relaxed waggle, right? And that's reducing tension. Or like Patrick Cantlay, as much as we hate how slow he plays, he gets that nice little foot hop going, and that allows him to feel less tension in his setup. You could also do the Ernie Els shimmy and shake, right? So tension and tempo, that's very important. And what golf researchers have found recently is that amateurs are getting their pressure all wrong. What I mean by that, to keep it really simple on you, is amateurs will go to the top of their swing. They start out generally loose on the club. They get to the top and they squeeze. And then when you squeeze, the club wants to kick out. We cast it, we get over the top. I'm in a really bad position here, and the hands don't release and they tighten up, and then you're wide open, and then sure enough, you're slicing it, right? So one of the first things I do when I get a slicer into my academy is I just, basically have them to get their arms feel like a wet noodle, right? And I'll do this a few times with them. They're going to feel silly, they're going to feel stupid, and then they're going to set up to it, and I'll tell them to grip it at about a 2 out of 10, really big relaxed waggles like an old-fashioned player, and then get to the top and let the club feel very loose. I wish you could see that drive. It was a pretty good one. That was my first drive of the day. I went right up the middle, and I have been historically a terrible driver of the golf ball on my first shot. But because I felt nice and loose, it was so easy for me to let that club release over. Now, the opposite, what do tour players do from the top? And a lot of it is, momentum breeds confidence. So when they get to the top of their swing, well, first off, they start tighter relative to an amateur, and they get to the top of their swing and their arms soften and the club loads, and the club will shallow a little bit, right? So it goes this way naturally because there's less pressure, then it's going to release. So it's kind of crazy to think there's all this craze right now online about getting the club shallow and we're doing these aggressive forcing, shallowing motions. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap myself too as an instructor and as a player, but that really isn't the answer. The answer is to just relax, loosen up, right? The more we can loosen up, the better. So how can we start to develop a practice like that for the golf course? Because that's all I really care about, is how can you get to feel it on the golf course? That's where it really matters. It's great I can do it on the driving range right here, but how can we get ourselves to relax a little bit more? So an old pro that I love to watch, one of my favorite players, and I emulated him growing up, was KJ Choi. Bit of a random example, but he was one of the best players in the mid-2000s, and he had a very unique practice routine where he would stand beside the ball, take one practice swing, nice and loose. He'd throw the club down like this, looking at his target, set up to it, and then swing from there. Reminds me kind of Nick Faldo too. Faldo would stand right here and really loosen himself and kind of creep himself into the ball like that, okay? So look at it this way. Make one practice swing at 20%, and then another practice swing at 50%, and then step in and feel like 70%. So here's what that's gonna look like. 20%, really nice and loose. 50%, pretty loose there too. Letting the arms feel like wet noodles. And I'm just gonna say to myself 70%, and swing from there. That's what I really want you to start focusing on, is tempo and tension at the top, right? You can do some loading drills as well too. I think that's very helpful. So that's another one here. I don't want you to think about a pause at the top like Ben Kruper, right? Because I think for an amateur golfer, that's gonna get you too static. That's gonna cause squeezing. When you do the pause drill, think of it more as a load, like a slingshot. I'm gonna get to the top, load it up, and then let it go from there, okay? And that's really what I want you to focus on and track it, okay? When you track it, look at it on video, and you should see your club coming in more like this as you come down, okay? So when I do that, not to get too technical on you, but I'm almost feeling my right hand soften a little bit. It's almost like taking a tray of drinks and gripping it like this, right? If I take the tray of drinks and dump it this way, I'm gonna have a mess on my hands, okay? So that's what I want you to work on to going forward, is just really keep it simple as always. That's my big motto, is keep it simple. I don't want you thinking all these different thoughts. To give you one extra little thing to jump onto too, because I always like options. I think it's important to have options, because you might try one thing and it just does not work for you, is think about metronome training, okay? So metronome training is becoming very big in professional circuits. You're seeing it at all levels, and it's really that 3-to-1 training. A simple thing you can do is go on YouTube and type in 55 beats per minute, and that's going to emulate tour tempo. Now, I like to take that tour tempo and change it around a little bit. I have a bit of a quicker, shorter swing. So personally for me, I like 70 beats per minute because it allows me to be a little bit more quick. 55 feels too slow. So it should essentially be like this. You're going to hear tick, 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 and then go. So you go on the first tick, and then on the second tick, you fire from the top. And it's a great way to go from wedge to driver and feel the same tempo. Okay, so one additional tip for you too, I always want to make sure that you have good practice habits that you can go with, is start doing flip-flop practice. I've never really heard of people doing this before, but for me, it was an important one for me to rebuild my driver. And again, I was an awful driver of the golf ball. Like, I could not find a fairway to save my life 10 years ago. So I started doing, I was like, okay, what's my favorite club in my bag? It's my 9-iron. I'll hit my 9-iron in my sleep, and the driver is the one that scares me. So all I would do is hit my 9-iron. I'd bring my 9-iron and driver to the range, and I'd go 9-iron driver, 9-iron driver, 9-iron driver. And what I was trying to do is emulate the same tempo. Obviously, the technique changed quite a bit from 9-iron to driver naturally, but I was able to generate what felt like a similar tempo, and it felt so much easier for me to square up the face. So if you have any comments or questions, let me know in the comments section. I would love to hear more about what you're struggling with your game. That really allows me to make good content for you. You know, no issue is too small. I really want to make sure that I cover all the bases for you. Thanks so much for listening along today.